All right, hey team. Um, Here we go. We're going to talk about Washington State government today. I'm actually really excited to talk to you about this. Up to this point, we have looked at the structures of the U.S. government. Today, we get to look at Washington State. You will discover that there are a lot of similarities. There's also a lot of differences. So if you haven't already, please pull up the note taking and responses document. I believe it's entitled Washington State Note Taking and Responses Document. It is the in class activity for Thursday, no, Monday, May 5th. All right. Um, okay, now that we have that open and ready to go, you'll see that there is a note taking piece at the top. If you're watching this on your own, I encourage you to pause to take notes. If you're watching this live in class, I have linked the screencast on your note taking document, so highly encourage you to go back and take a look at parts that you might need. All right, again, let's get into it. There's a lot of really cool, exciting stuff with respect to the Washington State government, so let's go. All right, we're dealing with a couple of questions here. First off, how is Washington State's government organized? And secondarily, in what ways is the government similar to and different from the federal government? All right. This is again what I've indicated is sort of the one of the big takeaways I want you to get from this. The note taking part is structured around this. The first response is basically which form of government. We're seeing two different versions of democracy here. So, which form of democracy do you like better? All right, and obviously explain your answer. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's talk about some similarities and differences. Let's start out with Constitution. They both have constitutions. So that's a similarity. All right. This one was written in 1889, which is interestingly 100 years after the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. It is 70 pages long. It's much longer. I'm not going to answer this question for you, but think about it. Would an anti federalist or a federalist like a much longer constitution? All right. I'm not going to answer that for you. Got to answer it yourself. 109 amendments. Again. Ooh, that's a lot. Do you recall how many there are amendments to the U.S. Constitution? Again, not going to tell you. You should know this. I'm sure you've guessed it's fewer, though. And again, who would like this? An anti federalist or federalist? We've got a much longer Constitution. We've got many more amendments. All right. So these are, again, similarities that they have them both, but differences in that they are both much longer. Similarity to the structures of government, there are three branches. There is an executive, a legislative, and a judicial. And again, they're set so as for checks and balances, right? So again, your governor can veto laws. Laws can be considered unconstitutional as well. All right, so similar checks and balances in place. Our capital is established in Olympia. No doubt many of you have visited there on some sort of school trip or other business. All right, let's keep moving. So there is a capital, right? I didn't really have that as a box for you, but yes, there is a capital. All right, let's keep moving. Separation of powers. Wait, hold it. Isn't that what it says? I got something here. All right. The legislative branch. The state, Washington State, is divided into 49 districts. Actually, kind of similar, I guess, that our nation is in 50 states, right? But this is 49 districts. Can we guess the state's structure? How is the legislative branch in the state structured? Think about how is it structured in the federal branch and then make guesses. Similar? Different? It is a bicameral Congress. That is a similarity. Bicameral, two chambers, right? There is a House of Representatives and there is a Senate. All right, that's a similarity. Bicameral, right? Two chambers. The Senate has 49 members, the House has 98. Here we have some similarities and, maybe even some differences. We have one Senate per district. I mean, that's kind of similar in the states have, in a portion two per state, right? Um, the House at the federal level, you will recall, depends on population. Here in the House, we have a set number of members for each district, and it's two for each, all right? It doesn't fluctuate up and down with numbers. So I guess that's sort of a difference, but it's not a super clear cut difference. Because as you'll see, what they really try to do, these are our 49 districts, is they try to map it so there are similar populations in this larger area as there are in this smaller area, right? So they do try to have some fidelity to population numbers when they figure out House representatives. So, we don't shrink and enlarge in states based on populations, right? We don't do that. But at the state level for House representatives, after every 10-year census, we look at the population of numbers, the movements of people, and these districts can get larger or smaller. Yes, that's gerrymandering. Absolutely. And by the way, you might think based on, oops, that should be 30 to 19. I don't know why that says that. Did I have it messed up here? Okay, it's correct there. You might guess that based on holding the House and the Senate, that the Democrats would be able to be in charge of the redistricting. And in some states, it's like that. In Washington state, actually, there is a bipartisan, right? That means represented by both parties, Republicans and Democrats, commission that is in charge of redistricting. So you have, greater fairness, right? So, important to note with the legislative session, the odd years are budget years, all right? And we just finally passed a budget. It was like $12 billion over budget not long ago. I actually don't know all the details on how they ended up getting it to budget. That'll be an interesting thing to discover. So legislative session is longer for odd years, 105 days. And even years, it's only 60 days. All right. That is our legislative branch. All right. You're seeing some similarities, quite a few, maybe some differences as well. All right. Let's move on. Actually, we're not moving on quite yet. I guess I have this as more anecdotal. There's really no note taking thing for this. But I wanted to compare this with this and just ask what sort of pattern you're seeing. And I guess I should unpack what exactly this map means. Blue means they voted for Biden. Red means they voted for Trump. I guess one thing you might look at initially is there seems to be a whole lot more red than there is blue, right? So as far as geographically, these areas are more densely populated, right? So you have larger numbers voting for Democrats. And you're seeing a lot of these on the West Coast. We have this right here, which is blue. I think there is a pretty clear answer why. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you. Ask one another. Conduct some research. So there is a movement among some individuals that want to see how this is one state and this is another state, right? Rather than cutting it horizontally like this, They want to cut it vertically like this. And I'm going to ask you, do you think Republicans want this or Democrats? In general, in broad strokes, are Republicans more inclined to like this deal or Democrats? You can take a look at this. This was the 2024 data. Oops. Sorry, I didn't change the names though. This is Harris. Sorry, this is Harris. I did not change the name, but I did change the data. Actually, this went from 58 to 57, and I think this went from 54 to 55. The numbers were nearly the same from 2020 election, but this should read Harris Trump. So yeah, who do you think wants that? Not gonna answer that for you. Figure it out. Use those intellectual chops. All right, let's keep moving. We are now going to talk about the executive branch. Here we got Bob Ferguson. He was just elected as governor. You may recall Jay Inslee was our previous governor, and I know some of you may have even met Jay Inslee for one reason or another. I feel like I've seen him in some on SAS Instagram, or I don't know. Some people have taken pics with him at some point for some reason. Um, Maybe the Youth Ledge people met him. I don't recall. Anyway, executive branch, Bob Ferguson. The governor is like the president. And like the president, he serves 4 year terms. Oh, and by the way, this guy, Bob, when he was attorney general, um, he came and spoke to Model UN at Seattle Hmong Conference. And you'll see here his interests. Birder. Birder. You got that right. And I guess another little anecdote here, something cool about Bob. When he graduated high school, he ended up taking a gap year. And what he did with his gap year actually was he went to Europe and he traveled around Europe and he played chess. He traveled around Europe playing chess. Obviously, it takes a good bit of privilege to be able to do that. I would think. I don't know his circumstances really, but that's a pretty cool gap year, right? He followed a passion. I think he actually attained a pretty high title in chess. Chess. I don't know. Grandmaster. I don't know. What do you call these big chess people? I forget. But anyway, he got some big important title with respect to chess. I should have like figured that out before I started this. All right. Sorry. Anecdote. We're gonna keep moving. Our Attorney General, Nick Brown, and again, I mentioned that Bob Ferguson had been in this position, so this is our Attorney General's first year here, Nick Brown. Our current, these are our current um, Treasurer and Secretary of State. I also put our former Secretary of State here before, and I think at least for one of the blocks, I know I talked about her in the past. Her name is Kim Wyman. She's been out of this position for a few years now, but she is the engineer of our gold standard voting system. I don't know if you've talked to your folks, if your folks do vote in the state of Washington, if they're able to vote or choose to vote. It is so easy. You get your ballot in the mail, you fill it out, you drop it off at numerous convenient locations. And you can drop it off whenever you want, midnight, 2 a.m., doesn't matter. It's so easy. And this system is developed by a Republican. Kim Wyman is a Republican. So I know Republicans take a lot of heat for voter suppression, this and that. These are the actions of some Republicans, not all of them. This Republican is so good at her job that she was actually hired by the Biden administration in 2020 to be a senior advisor for election security with the Department of Homeland Security. And this is actually a job she continues to hold under the Trump administration. All right. I realize I should be talking about Washington State government, and I'm talking about our former Secretary of State. But I do think it's really important to know. Steve Hobbs has done a great job of continuing the legacy of Kim Wyman, making voter easy and accessible for Washingtonians. All right, let's keep moving. Um, we have a judicial branch. Much like the Supreme Court of the United States, there are 9 members. That's a similarity. If you were to guess, how do you think these Supreme Court justices in Washington get appointed? And how long are their terms? You might have guessed that our executive branch, Bob Ferguson, our governor, would appoint them for life terms. That would be a great guess because that's how our United States system works. It does not work like that in Washington. You elect them. I elect them. They are elected in the same way the governor or the secretary of state are elected, or your representatives. You elect them to 6-year terms. All right. Um, there are some states that have lifetime, you elect to lifetime service in the Supreme Court. Rhode Island, New York, Massachusetts. Interestingly, though, you can elect them and they serve a life term, yet they must retire at 70 years old, which is actually an interesting clause to that rule because if we were to apply that to Supreme Court of the United States, 4 of our 9 justices would have to retire. We have 4 of our 9 justices. That's, I don't know, nearly half, right? That would not qualify under those terms. Interesting. All right. So, again, some similarities, a lot of differences with respect to the judicial branch. Let's keep moving. Okay, I'm going to make a little transition. We're going to go back in history just for a moment here. And I want us to recall this um, sort of framework that we've talked about in the past: problem, idea, solution. I mentioned it with one of our previous presentations when I talked about how a bill becomes law. An example of that was Obamacare. What was the problem? Millions of people without health care. What was the idea? Let's provide higher quality health care and expand it for a larger number of people. What was the solution? You had then the bill pass, the Obamacare bill pass. All right, that was the solution. Let's go back in time for another problem. Corruption, money in politics, the Gilded Age, so called by Mark Twain. Gilded isn't quite golden, right? If something is gilded, it's shiny on the outside, but corrupted on the inside, or corruptible on the inside, right? So it's sort of like a fraud. So this time period, sort of the beginnings of our 20th century, is regarded as a Gilded Age because of its shiny, opulent exterior, but horrific, corruptible interior. All right? And there was a problem in that there was too much money in politics. The poor felt like they had just lost political power because of corrupt politicians serving themselves. So, if you imagine this is the problem, what sort of idea for a solution was there? These are examples of direct democracy, initiatives, referendums, recalls. All right? Just reading the screen here right now, these are essentially ways for the voter to bypass elected legislators and politicians to create laws and remove corrupt politicians directly. Okay, what we're talking about here is not federal mechanisms. There are no examples of direct democracy at the federal level in the United States. Unfortunately, some countries do have examples of direct democracy. Um, I can think of Switzerland being a great example, Germany, Liechtenstein. There's not many examples. All right, but let's unpack exactly what these are. All right, and before I start, I just want to say, you as Washingtonians, have access to all three of these levers for direct democracy. We are so lucky in this state. As we'll see from a map shortly, not all countries have this. We are extremely lucky. All right, so let's talk about what these three things are. They're super cool. Again, these are examples of direct democracy. These are offered for at the state level for some states. Some states will have all three. Some states might have one, two. We have all three of them in our state. And again, these sorts of options do not exist at a federal level. All right, initiative. This is a means by which a petition signed by a certain minimum number of registered voters can force a public vote. I should have researched the numbers. I want to say it's like 8% of the voting population at the last gubernatorial election. That gubernatorial election is means like when a governor was elected. Why did they select that? Because kind of like with presidential elections, people feel like, oh, I don't want to vote. But then if it's a presidential election, they think, oh, this one's important, right? Which is totally false. But the reality is, you get higher percentage of people voting at the state level, like gubernatorial elections, federal level presidential elections, right? So I believe it is 8% of the um, total number of votes for that election, and there is a specific number it comes out to. I can't recall. I'm gonna have to like throw it up and let you know. It is Googleable as well. It's I don't know several hundred thousand votes anyway. I should have that number. I apologize. All right, but anyway, this is a means by which a petition signed. You see those people at the farmers markets. They're like, "Hey, sign this." That could be an initiative right there. It very likely is an initiative. All right. Um, it can force a public vote. So basically, what this means is I, as a citizen, can draft a law that says I don't want any gas powered leaf blowers in my state anymore. I can write that law. I can write that law. And it will go on the ballot if I get enough people in the state to agree that this is a great idea and we can vote on it, right? I don't need to rely on a person in Congress to bring this to the floor to be passed as a law. I write it and I just need to get the signatures and put it out there. It's a brilliant thing. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if we were able to do this at the federal level? All right, it's exciting stuff, man. If you're not excited, you're not listening. All right, let's keep moving. Referendum. So here's an example of a law that you might consider unconstitutional or a bad law. You can get rid of those, right? So it is an election device in which a law can be either accepted or repealed based on a popular vote of the people. All right, I'll give you examples of these in a bit. So this is the second lever of direct democracy. Third one, recall. A procedure by which voters can remove an elected official from office through a direct vote. Someone's doing a bad job in office, they're not following through, remove them. All right, some examples. Initiative 1639 in 2018 was a measure that raised the minimum age to purchase semi-automatic assault weapon to 21. It added background checks, waiting periods, and enacted some sort of a storage requirement. All right, this is again an initiative that was written by the people of Washington State, got the appropriate number of signatures. It was put on a ballot, and the Washington State people voted for it. It doesn't go through the Congress at all. They have nothing to do with it, right? They could, and there's a way for that, but I'm talking about this sort of initiative to the people here. You write it. There is actually a way to write an initiative and give it to a legislator to bring to discussion and pass the bill that way. But this is an example of an initiative to the people. All right. Here's an example of a referendum in 2012. Washington State redefined what it meant to engage in a legal marriage, broadening it to include gay marriage. This was a referendum, which, again, it threw out the old definition of marriage and assigned new meaning to it. Recall, this is a popular one. The governor of California in 2003 was recalled. All right. And who became governor at that time? Arnold Schwarzenegger. And if it wasn't funny enough, you might know. I guess fewer people know nowadays. But Arnold Schwarzenegger had a very popular movie called Total Recall, so it was sort of funny. Um, One of your state representatives, Kshama Sawant, no longer a representative in the state of Washington, but she was a representative for the district that actually includes SAS. She underwent a recall process and she barely passed it. Those voting no for the recall, so keep her in office, were like 50.38%. And then the people that wanted her out were like 49.62%. Something crazy like that. It was so tight. But indeed, she was not recalled. She was not reelected either, though, shortly thereafter. There were some problems with her use of public space during COVID, and I think she also marched an angry mob to the mayor's home, which is not supposed to be publicly disclosed. Other people can be recalled. I know most recently, a couple years ago, there were some school board members from the North Shore School District that tried to make it okay to not mask when there was a state mandate for masking, and those three board members were recalled. There's been other examples. All right, let's keep moving. I believe this is our last slide. Yes, this is, and I mentioned to you that not all states have all three. If your state If the state, rather, is in blue, it means that they have all three: initiative, referendum, and recall. And you can read the other ones, right? Red means there's no example of direct democracy at all. No example. They don't have any of the three. Like orange, for instance, we have some of those. Recall only. Okay. Gray, not many of those. Referendum only. Lighter blue, initiative only. All right. And then there's a few that have initiative and referendum in the green, but no recall, right? So take a look at this, because one of the questions I ask you, the last question here, is what kind of pattern are you seeing? Are you seeing some outliers to the pattern? Are any, is there anything surprising about this as far as states that might have direct democracy or not have direct democracy, as you attempt to like categorize that, like who has it, who doesn't? One of the questions I asked for you. All right, team. I've said enough. I'm sorry there were a couple points there that I needed to research in advance to give you more precise information. I'll make sure to have that for you next time. Or Google that. I asked you a few questions and didn't give you the answer to that also, so maybe just Google those. But again, I will make sure to give you that exact figure of how many signatures one needs for a Washington State initiative. No doubt some of you civics nerds have already Googled that over the course of the presentation and yelled it out in class. High five. All right, I'm signing off now. I appreciate you all. Please continue to work on that Google Doc.